This morning, we continue with a sermon series called Gods at War. And we're going to talk about the God of love. But before I do that, I wanted to mention to you, if you were to look up in the dictionary the word obsession, you would find that it says the domination of one's thoughts or feelings. The domination of one's thoughts or feelings. I then looked up the word dominate. And it says there, to have a commanding influence on, or to exercise control over. So, an obsession is such a way in which something or someone exercises control over your thoughts and your feelings. Now, I don't know if you're familiar, I wasn't until just recently, that on TLC, on cable, I don't have cable, but on TLC I understand there's a show called My Crazy Obsession. Now, I've never seen it, but I did a little research on it, and I found out a couple of things. I found out that this is a show about men and women who are truly obsessed. There was a man on there by the name of Ralph. Ralph had been collecting ketchup for 44 years. He cashed in his life insurance policy so that he could purchase new additions to his collection. He literally has hundreds of bottles, not to mention socks and pillows and blankets and jugs and signs. One bottle alone is said to be worth $1,000. Why? I have no idea. He has a sweatshirt that says, "Celebrate life with ketchup." Not to be outdone, there's Barry. Barry collects mustard. He has the world's largest collection of mustard. 26 years he's been collecting, and his collection is now valued at over $125,000 worth of mustard. So, should any of you need mustard, just call Barry. Then there's Tamis. Tamis has been collecting wigs for 15 years, and she has now over 2,000 wigs. Every kind of wig imaginable, believe me. I had a photo of her holding a mohawk kind of a wig. And then, one more I'll mention is someone by the name of Ron, not this Ron, thank you, but Ron, who is so obsessed with the presidents of the United States that he, in fact, spent 2.5 years designing, 8 months building, and $250,000 paying for, in addition to his house, which is, in fact, a replica of the Oval Room, down to the most minute detail. He is so obsessed by this room that his wife and children are told that they can go in, but they can't move anything. In fact, if you were to go onto the website for TLC, and I did just look at a few of the snippets, the little videos, the teasers that they have there, a number of them would speak to the fact that these men and women are so obsessed that they think about it every waking moment of their day. They themselves would say that. They are poster children for this idea of being obsessed. So, related to that, let me ask you a question. Who do you say "I love you" to? To whom do you use those 3 words? Friend, family, spouse, parents, siblings, children. Who do you love? You know, I know it's a word that many of us use flippantly, and it's a very common word. I love chocolate, I love roller coasters, I love to go on drives on a sunny day, whatever I love, I love, I love. But who do you genuinely stand before, face to face, and say to them those 3 words and mean it sincerely? I love you. Because I will this morning posture a point, a possibility, a chance that because of that person, because of the relationship that you have the opportunity that relationship can be used for bad. Just as I have been preaching for the last several weeks, that God gives us many wonderful things, many pleasures intended to be good for us. But we can, if we obsess over them, they can become a problem for us. We can take them to the extreme, and we can dismount God from his throne, and we can place literally a person there. So when you answer the question, to who do you say I love you? Have you placed that person on the throne of your heart to the expense of God Almighty? I would like to lead you through a story in the Bible. It's a very interesting story. It's one you can very quickly pass by and not really catch the meaning of what it is there. So I'd like you to grab your Bible. If you didn't bring one, grab the blue pew Bible. And I'd like for you to look up in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, chapter 29. Now, starting in verse 16, I'm going to read to you, but I'm going to do a little bit of narrating. I'm going to read a verse, narrate a little, read a verse, narrate a little. And I'm going to lead us into the actual passage that I want to spend some time on this morning. But I'm going to begin by telling you that there is this man by the name of Jacob. And Jacob has nothing to his name. And he went and he found a lady who was a shepherdess, a female shepherd, right? And she was out with her animals. And he meets her and he falls in love with her. Her name is Rachel. Okay? And he has now fallen in love with her. Now, in the day, there was this tradition that if you were going to marry someone's daughter, you must replace their daughter. You must pay for her, essentially. You must give a dowry. And so Jacob, in order to marry this woman that he has loved and fallen in love with, he needs to provide the family with animals, with land, with gold, silver, whatever money that he has. Something that they would consider to be worthy of their child. But he has nothing. And so he chooses, because he loves her, that he is going to approach the father and ask the father if he could have them hand in marriage. And the dowry that he would give would be 7 years of service with his family, helping him with the animals and such. So, with that, I want to read to you verse 16. Now, Laban, that's the father, had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Now, Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Now, I happen to have 2 daughters, and 20 and 22 years old. And one day, I suspect that they will get married. And I would very much like to reinstitute this whole dowry thing. And I'm hoping, I'm not so sure I really want a cow, but, they're worth a lot in my mind. Just want you to know that. So we'll see how that works out. But we've got this man by the name of Rachel, and he has approached the father and says, I want to marry your daughter. Will you allow me to give a dowry of 7 years to them? Now, it says in my translation, in 17, Leah had weak eyes. And if you look at the footnote, it also says, or delicate. Actually, the Hebrew behind that is very confusing, and to this day, still not sure exactly how to define it. But a lot of people, or a lot of other translations have it as pretty, as nice, but it's this idea, essentially, that in the eyes of Jacob, Rachel is much more beautiful, right? He has found her to be attractive. He has started a relationship with her emotionally, and he would like to marry her, okay? Now, in verse 20, or in 19, it says, Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed only a few days to him because of his love for her. Now, keep your finger there. Don't close your Bible. I'm going to keep going. But I want to leave you at this point with this idea that, isn't that the way love is? Love doesn't allow us, it affects us in such a way that we see life differently. That 7 years were like only a few days. We don't necessarily, because of the love and the emotional connection we have with someone, sometimes it can cause us to not see reality the way it really is. And Jacob here is said to have fallen in such love with her that, he's just, the time has just flown by, right? And he's so anxious, he's so wanting to marry this woman. Our emotions get involved, and sometimes we don't see so clearly. So then it goes on, in 21 it says, Then Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her. Not exactly the most romantic comment to be making to the father, but the Bible is very truthful and says things the way that they are. But the interesting thing about this is that all of a sudden this becomes a soap opera, a reality show. There is going to be a twist here that suddenly shows up, and things start going downhill fast. All right? So we've got this very interesting story that's building up here. Now he's finished his 7 years, and it goes on in 22 and says this. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? Laban replied, It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work. Now, you've got this twist that's happened. Now, in the day, they wore veils, that would have been very common. And so it's very likely, according to this story, it actually happened, that he was able to deceive her, and in the darkness of night, not realize who she really was until he woke up in the light of day and the next morning and realized that the woman that he had been with is not the woman that he expected to be with. And now he's ticked. He's very upset by what's going on here, right? This is not the woman. Now think about this. For 7 years, he's been working toward this specific goal in mind, right? 7 years, toiling, working, giving up his time, knowing that there is this gold pot at the end of the rainbow called Rachel that he is going to receive, and he's been working for that, and he loves her. 7 years of relationship with her, 7 years of conversations, 7 years of taking walks with her, 7 years of sitting next to her and having a relationship. Getting to know her, her thoughts, her ideas, her preferences, her goals, her hopes. Not Leah. Leah's great. Leah's another sister. She's there in the family too. Surely he talked to her as well. But not like that. Not in that way. He has invested 7 years into Rachel, and all of a sudden he finds himself waking up next to Leah. It's a soap opera. It's a crazy reality show. And he's not happy at all about what's happened. Now, we don't know. We're not told. Was Leah forced to do this, or did she do it willingly and joyfully? We don't know. But we are aware that Leah loved Jacob. Loved him dearly. In fact, that very issue is going to become the problem now between the two wives. Because you see, Leah loves Jacob, and Jacob loves Rachel, and they're not too fond of each other, the sisters. It becomes a competition. You see, Leah has such love for her, or him, that she sees that if, or thinks that if she can have boys, if she can have sons, if she can give sons to this man, he will love her. You see, in the day, having sons was a huge status symbol. They were far more valuable than the daughters of the day. And so they would always want sons. And the woman that gave birth to sons was giving praise and glory, and their status of the family would raise. Well, here we have a situation where now Rachel is not able to bear children, but Leah is. And that brings us to 35. And I'd like to read to you our passage for this morning. Actually, I'm going to start with 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So he was named Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. This is the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord. Now, in fact, she will later in the story have another 2 children. She'll actually give birth to 6 boys to Jacob. It's an interesting thing to note that 5 of those boys, that when she names them, 5 of them, she references the husband. "Surely now he will love me. Surely the Lord has now seen my misery, and I will experience the love of the husband." 5 of the 6, she references the husband. Isn't it interesting that the one that she doesn't, and she says it here, is the 4th boy, called Judah. She merely says, "This time I will praise the Lord." Now, if you're familiar with genealogy of the Bible, you would realize that it is through Judah that both Mary and Joseph are born. Isn't it interesting that the one given to God, the one in which she praises God and only God, is the one through which the mother and father of Jesus, the stepfather, if you will, mother and father of Jesus, are born. The other 5, in every case, when she names it, she specifically says, "This is because now I pray that my husband will finally love me." She yearns for the love that he's giving Rachel. Her breath, her life, her very being is wrapped up in this relationship that she is having or not having with her husband. It means everything to her. And she doesn't know how to proceed without it, it seems. You know, we love the idea of love. You know, we have all of these stories that end with, "and they lived happily ever after," and we end up putting that dream on the altar of our life and bowing down to it. In our culture, romantic love is held up as the ultimate human experience. It's subject of countless books. It has inspired the beautiful works of poetry and art. It's the plot line of innumerable movies. It's the theme of an untold number of songs. But don't misunderstand me. The relationship between a man and a woman is God-given. Absolutely blessed by God. Marriage is designed by God himself. It is intended to be a gift. It was never intended, however, to be placed at such a high level of priority, to be placed on the throne and move God to second at best. That's not what marriage is supposed to be. In fact, I would argue that when you place God on the throne of your marriage will be far greater and better than it could ever possibly be otherwise. There was a young mother who explained that her love for her children had become a false god to her life. The problem wasn't so much that she had placed them too high of a priority. The problem was that they controlled her. Their emotions controlled her emotions. When they had a bad day, she had a bad day. When they had a good day, she had a good day. And her life would literally mirror the life of her children. They controlled her. They dominated her life. The relationship that she had with the children was such that when they had health problems, she was miserable. It's not that we don't love our children. It's not that we don't care. It's not that we don't have this emotional attachment to our loved ones, children's parents, spouses, friends, family. Absolutely. There is a heart-level connection, and it's impossible to sever that to the point that you don't care what happens to them. That's not love. Of course you care, and of course you get bound up in that emotion and that love, and it pulls you into the path that they're going on, and they're into your path, and together there is some mirroring that happens. But when you place that in such a place, such a priority, that it is first and foremost in your life, and God is a second thought, then it's taken as an obsession. It's gone too far. It's now dominating you. God has ordered our lives in such a way that He is to be the most significant in our life. Sometimes it's not Dr. Phil that we need to go to, or counseling, or the next best self-help book. Sometimes it's simply a matter of putting God back where He's supposed to be. Leah was desperate to find satisfaction in the God of romance, in the God of romantic love. And every time she gave birth to a child, she prayed and hoped that now, my husband would finally see me, love me. But that wasn't who Jacob was. She finally stopped looking, at least for a moment, for one moment, to her husband for all those things that only God could give her. And she looked to God one time when a little boy by the name of Judah was born. And she gave praise to God simply because God is God. My wife and I went to a movie this past Friday night by the name of God's Not Dead. If you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. Very, very good movie. Ladies, you might want to bring some Kleenex, but it's a very good movie. I really enjoyed it. Powerful statement. It's a whole lot about this professor who proclaims to be an atheist, and a student in his class that stands up for his faith, and in front of the class defends God. And what ensues in the friendships and the relationships around this, in part because of that, but in also separately things that are going on, and it's a powerful movie. But there's a scene in that movie where there's a pastor who's sitting in a cafe with a lady who has approached him to explain to him that the professor that she has come to know and love is controlling her. And in fact, not providing the kind of love that she would like. And so he asks some very deep, meaningful questions of her. He says things like, why is it that you are in a relationship with this man? What is it that you hope to get? And in the conversation, it appears that the answer is the fact that she is, or that he is, prominent in the community, that he's very good looking, fairly wealthy, and his love upon her, it makes her feel good. It gives her self-worth and value, and she's able to hobnob with these other big shots in the community, if you will, and she values that, and she realizes for the first time what has happened to her. And she sees finally with clear eyes that this relationship is not a healthy relationship for her. She's looking for validation when it is God that gives validation. You know, the pastor makes the comment that the universe was created by him. Do you believe that? He asks. She says, yes. Well, do you believe that he doesn't make any mistakes? She says, well, yeah, I believe that. And he says, well, he created you, and you are not a mistake. And he loves you. He sent his son to die for you, and he would send his son again to die just for you if that were necessary. You don't need to look to this man for value and for validation. You need to look to God. You need to find your hope in God. You know, God, as best friend, answers us whenever we call. He's never too busy for us. God, as friend, tells us we're beautiful, always. God, as friend, is completely committed to us, to his death of his Son. He inspires us moment by moment, and he meets all of our true needs all of the time. True needs, not wants. That's as friend. As parent, God loves and cherishes us unconditionally. Gives us direction, guidance. Disciplines us, yes. Holds us accountable, absolutely. But does it lovingly. Comforts us, protects us, always. God as friend, God as parent. But I wanted to mention three things real quick to help each of us to identify if we have a relationship that has gotten to be somewhat obsessive, some bit of an idol in our life. Three things I want you to consider that might change that whole situation for you. First, take care of your spiritual life. You know, it's so tempting and happens often that a spiritual life gets jettisoned, gets thrown away, gets set aside when we have this new amazing relationship. And you spend all of your time intentionally devoting yourself to that relationship. And there's a lot of goodness in all of that, but not, again, not to the extent of removing God and damaging your spiritual life. Not setting aside the Bible and never getting to it. And missing when you miss out on coming to worship, when you're not around other Christians and believers, when you're not in a group of people who have come to know you and love you for who you are. As the pattern goes, there's a honeymoon phase, you know, in that relationship. And sometimes it gives way to conflict and to sin. But once we're awakened to the not-so-divine reality, we realize that we're walking with our new love that has replaced our first love. Don't let it happen. Protect your time with God. Make it intentional. Purify your life by being in the pure word of the Lord. A relationship is only as healthy as the quality time that you spend. If you want to have a relationship with the Lord, you need to spend quality time. So, take care of your spiritual life. Secondly, take care of their spiritual life. I didn't say be their spiritual life. I said take care of it. That approach will show itself faulty and relationship will crumble if you try to be their relationship for them. Instead, think of their relationship as a garden. And you get the privilege, because they allow you to walk in their garden. But God is the master gardener. And he knows what he's doing. And if your spiritual life is one of health and goodness and sound foundation, God is going to be whispering to you, asking you to nurture here, to water there. And if you listen, if your spiritual life is good and true, you are going to be, in some ways, part of the hands and feet of the master gardener in the spiritual life of the one you're gardening. You are a guest within his great work. Walk through this garden with interest, with care, with love. Be concerned about their spiritual life. Be the master gardener's hands if he asks you to water and nurture. But ultimately, the garden's health is between the garden and the gardener. One day, should you ever be asked to exit the garden, please leave it better than you found it. And third, take care to discuss God in your relationship. It is said that out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what are the two of you, or multiple, if you're talking about children or siblings or whatever, what are you talking about? Does God ever come out of your mouth? Does Jesus Christ ever mention? People talk about what interests them. So demonstrate your interest in God by talking about Him with them. Sometimes, depending upon the relationship, that has to start out in baby steps. They may not be so receptive to that. Be careful. This is not about shoving anything down anyone's throat. Absolutely not. Just the opposite. This is about opening up doors, breaking down walls, chip by chip, so that the Holy Spirit might find His way in there and do His will with this person. There is much to your and their spiritual relationship with God. Take time to hear about it, to listen to them, and to share your faith with them. Pastor Jason is going to come up now, and he's going to lead us in communion. And I'd like for you to consider, as he does that, who do you love? Who is on the throne of your heart? Is it the master gardener, or is it the garden?